So, what does alien teddy bears, Santa Claus, a boxer, a demon, a vampire, for crying out loud, all have in common? Well, let's go ahead and roll back the clock to 1985 and take a look at five movies that are turning 40 this month.
Starting transmission.
So, first up, we're going to talk about a little film called Ewoks The Battle for Endor.
It's a breathtaking adventure that soars to extremes of heroism and treachery.
There's no escape for you, my little one.
But there is hope. Take a journey to the far reaches of your imagination. Ewoks, The Battle for Endor.
So, this movie actually came out in November of 1985 and is actually part two of the Ewok movies. So, the first Ewok movie was A Caravan of Courage, and this is now the second follow up to that one. And this is a pretty crazy one because I actually do remember watching this one a lot when I was younger. It was probably one of the few films that I saw before I even saw Star Wars, which is just a great thing about. So, like my knowledge of the Star Wars universe is pretty much these Ewok movies, and I don't know. I grew up watching them a lot when I was younger, and they've become like very like essential to my childhood. What's really cool is that this movie, even though it's kind of not loosely part of the Star Wars universe anymore, and it's kind of an Elseworld story, it still has ties to the actual Star Wars universe. And this movie was a made for television movie, so it didn't actually come out in theater, so there was like not really a box office push for this one. And some of the Star Wars lore that actually is tied to this movie are is just crazy to think about. So for some fun Star Wars lore that's tied to this movie, we have Charal, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is one of the Night Sisters. And the Night Sisters of Dathomir are actually part of Star Wars canon. And she is one of those witches. So the Night Sisters were pretty much Sith witches, I guess you could say. That's a mouthful right there. From Dathomir, and we see them in the Clone Wars cartoon. We most recently saw them on the Ahsoka TV show. So these beings are very much prominent into the Star Wars lore. And we first see them in live action here on this Ewoks movie. In addition, the martyrs in this movie actually have a creature called the Blurgs. And we actually see these creatures throughout Star Wars. Where do you ask? Of course, we see them in Dave Filoni shows, Clone Wars, Rebels, Mandalorian. So these creatures were first introduced in this movie, and they were actually kind of like sketches for like a tauntaun, but they didn't really go anywhere. So the designs were reused in this movie, and it's crazy to think about that. Those creature designs eventually didn't make it to future Star Wars stuff, and heck, I think we can probably say this helps make these movies part of canon. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'll leave it up to you guys. Um, so where does this movie take place in the Star Wars franchise? Well, actually, the Battle for Endor and Caravan of Courage actually take place right between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So it's like a couple of weeks before Return of the Jedi starts. So all these events and all this craziness is happening on Endor right before the Battle of Endor. So that's really cool to think about. It's really cool how this actual series actually has further ties in the Star Wars series. Because, like I said, when I first watched this movie, I didn't know what Star Wars was, so I had no recollection of how this would fit into the overall Star Wars universe. And you know what? It introduced me to Wicket. It introduced me to Warwick Davis, who plays Wicket in this movie. It's just, this is just such a fun movie. It's purely fantasy adventure kind of a film. I know it is streaming somewhere. I believe on Disney Plus right now. It's part of the else like their expanded universe storylines, whatever they're called. But yeah, this is a fun one. If you've never seen Star Wars or you're not really into the Star Wars mythology and looking for a nice kid film, I would recommend you checking out this one. So that is Ewok Battle, The Battle for Endor. Like I said, fun movie, and I can't believe it. It is turning 40. So next up, we have our first Christmas movie of the season. So coming out in 1985, we have Santa Claus, the movie. Now tell me, that doesn't sound like an epic adventure.
Santa Claus, the movie. Seeing is believing.
So this movie is two parts, and the first half of the movie is pretty much the origin story of Santa Claus. on how this masterful toy maker traveled to the North Pole, found this magical kingdom with all these elves, and basically from there becomes Santa Claus. And we also see different, like the different elves and some of the technology the elves have. And we meet Patch, played by Dudley Moore, who is like this intelligent elf that who is ahead of his time, should I say. And then we fast forward to present day, which is the middle of the 1980s, of course, and we learn that Patch and another elf are actually up for to be second in command to Santa Claus. And Patch has this really cool invention that he'll be able to make toys super fast, make more toys, kind of putting elves out of business per se. And man, this actually sounds much like a plot to other Santa Claus movies we see in the future. Anyways, I digress. So then Patch, we find out that Patch does get make second command, and then he gets kind of like demoted after we find out all the toys that this machine is making toys that are not of the quality that you would expect. And of course, this makes him pretty sad and everything. And this is kind of a bummer for him. But unfortunately, from there, Patch ends up leaving Santa Claus's workshop and goes to New York City, I believe it was, where he meets a businessman, another toy maker, BZ, played by the great John Lithgow. And it's here where we find out that he's gonna basically team up with the main bad guy of the movie, which is crazy to think about because BZ is like the main antagonist for the whole movie, and it's him and Santa Claus never meet throughout this movie. And that's just crazy to think about. But anyway, so Patch and BZ are trying to create the new Christmas, like I say, and they're trying to increase the toy brand. Patch is also bringing a lot of the magic that he has from the North Pole with him, and they're like putting into these other like toys and stuff like that. And it's just a crazy movie. This movie was probably I would say, the quintessential Santa Claus movie besides Miracle on 34th Street, the original one, the black and white one. But yeah, this one was like a must see watching in my house when I was growing up. I do remember watching this one a lot. It's funny to think that this is the movie my parents usually talk about being the Santa Claus movie that they actually love to watch. And for me, it was the main one for me would be Tim Allen's The Santa Claus. But I do remember watching this one. I remember fondly enjoying this one. Watching it on Christmas Eve. Getting ready to go to bed for Christmas Eve. You have your cookies out, your milk out, and wait for Santa Claus. And you're just gonna sit back and relax, and you know what? Put on this movie, and you know what? It has all the Christmas joy and spirit involved in it. And if you've never seen Santa Claus the movie, I do recommend you go check this one out. There's a lot of joy with this movie, a lot of fun, and this actually I'll say here, this actually may make my list of top Christmas movies to watch during the Christmas season. Yeah. Huh. Interesting to think about. Anyways, let's get on to the next movie on my list. So the next movie on my list is, come on, the classic. This is the movie about, US versus Soviet Union. I think you know what movie this is. Yes, it is Rocky 4.
I must break you.
Rocky 4.
Rocky's been around forever. And I just can't believe that this is actually turning 40 this month. And this was probably, it's weird to say that. I've seen more sequels as my first movies, but that is very true. Like, a lot of the original movies came out before I was born. So these sequels were movies I saw on repeat on TV when I was growing up. And Rocky 4 is one of those movies because who doesn't remember Rocky versus Ivan Drago? That was the quintessential boxing movie, sports movie. This was just so amazing. And this movie came out at the time of the whole conflict with the Cold War, with the US versus the Soviet Union. And it's kind of an allegory for the arms race in that sense, too. You also had this allegory going on where you had the classic boxer fighting against the boxer who's using 20th century technology to become a killing machine, essentially. Oh man, this movie has it all. It is great. Ivan Drago is a excellent villain in the Rocky franchise, and I would say this is peak Rocky. Because after this, I wouldn't say until the Creed movies did we get a really good Rocky movie. So what the movie's about is that we have Rocky, who's kind of retired per se. He is kind of on his way out of boxing. He's helping Apollo Creed, who was given this chance to fight against Ivan Drago, and he was going to be Apollo Creed's actual coach. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is during the fight, Rocky doesn't like actually throw in the towel, and Apollo Creed is killed by Ivan Drago. And this throws Rocky into turmoil. And here he is, after Apollo Creed's death, which is the driving force for the Creed movies. And that is why in Creed 2, I believe, he fights the son of Ivan Drago. So that's how those movies are tied together. But anyways, so what ends up happening in this movie is that Rocky ends up training. He's going to go against Ivan Drago and retain his title of world heavyweight champion. And yeah, we get to see how these two fighters are trained. We see how they get into their peak physical form. And of course, we have, in the end, I'm going to spoil it here for you guys. Rocky wins. And in a weird way, Rocky does win the Cold War in this movie. Interesting. Anyways, so that is Rocky 4. Some fun facts about this movie are Living in America by James Brown was actually written for this film, and it actually took the top 40, which is James Brown's highest rated song in the past 11 years from when this movie came out, which is just crazy to think about. In addition, there's probably a character in this movie that you probably forgot existed, and you're probably wondering when I was going to mention this character, and that is Seiko. You're asking yourself, who the hell is Seiko? Seiko is the robot. That is Polly's robot from this movie. His girlfriend, I guess, in one scene. It's weird. We don't want to talk about that part. But yeah, so Seiko, the robot, was actually a robot that was used as a therapeutic robot to help kids that have autism. And Sylvester Stallone fell in love with this whole idea. His son actually was diagnosed with autism, and this robot was something that he just fancied himself. And what doesn't say the 80s like robots? So, anyways, this robot would go into the movie, was actually very prominently placed in this movie. And we do see it quite often in this movie. He's washing cars. Like I said, he's Polly's girlfriend in one scene. Yeah, it's Polly's butler. It's such a crazy thing. It is so weird and out of the blue in this movie. It's such a strange thing. But doesn't it just make this movie so much more better? I know they got rid of Seiko in the director's cut, which I think was a horrible mistake when they did the director's cut, but come on, guys. This is an 80s movie. We have US versus Soviet Union. We have robots. This is peak 80s. And you know what? The original cut of this movie is probably still my favorite, and it always will be. So if you've never seen Rocky 4, I would do recommend you check out the other Rocky movies. But man, I'll let you know now. This is peak cinema. Now we're moving on up from our PG rated movies to now our PG 13 rated movie. And coming out 40 years ago was his acting debut. It's Jim Carrey's very first movie. It's Once Bitten.
Nothing is sacred in a tasty comedy
Can I have one of those uncooked ones?
you can sink your teeth into.
How was it?
Delicious.
Once bitten.
Yep, Once Bitten is a movie that you probably have never heard of. But the movie came out in 1985. It is about a 400-year-old countess who needs to drink the blood of a virgin. 3 times she needs to drink the blood of a virgin so that way she can keep eternal life. And unfortunately, this poor old sack, played by Jim Carrey, is her victim. So this movie, a very funny, silly comedy, very much 80s-esque. And it's really crazy about this movie is that Jim Carrey wasn't the original choice for this movie. So the original choice for this movie was actually Michael J. Fox. But the executive producer were like, no, we can't get Michael J. Fox. That's a TV show kid. He can't hold a movie on his own. Let's just say, 1985 was a good year for Michael J. Fox. Not only did he have a little movie called Teen Wolf. He also had the greatest movie of all time, Back to the Future, come out in 1985. It's crazy how to think about how people look down on Michael J. Fox. And he could have been part of this comedy movie too. Luckily, we got Jim Carrey, and you know what? The movie is not great. It's not a masterpiece. It's a fun little comedy. We got Jim Carrey turning into a vampire, all the shenanigans. You do see bits of what's going to be considered classic Jim Carrey in this movie. He's playing it very straight, and he doesn't give too much of the Jim Carrey-isms, but you do see some of that in this movie. But you know what? If you've never seen Once Bitten, I do recommend you check this out. It is doesn't a I'll just say it hasn't aged well, but it is a fun movie to watch. All right, let's go ahead and move into our very last movie that came out in 1985. Now let's get into the rated R movie that came out in 1985, a movie that I saw way too young, and it actually scared me for horror movies for many years. And that was Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge.
Freddy Krueger is back on Elm Street. He'll be in your neighborhood soon. A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 2. You are all my children now. Freddy's Revenge.
Now here's a movie that has a whole second life. So just to give you kind of the storyline for Freddy's Revenge, this movie takes place about 5 years after Nancy has moved out of her house, and a new family, the Walsh family, moves into Nancy's original house. And it's here that we find out that Freddy has a new plan in order to cause more mayhem. He's going to possess the oldest boy in this movie, take over his body, and actually find a way to come into the real world. It's very different from any of the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies because this movie doesn't really have dream sequence killings. But what's really crazy about the movie, this movie is very brutal. It's very mean spirited. And what's crazy to think about is that the legacy this movie has isn't the one you would think of. So what ended up happening was the writer and director of the movie actually said that they put in some very much homoerotic undertones to this movie. And it was those tones that kind of got away from people for many years. And now looking back at the movie, you watch it, now you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, okay, that's what they were going for. It is crazy to think about. Yeah, like I said, I saw this movie when I was way too young. I actually remember, I think my cousins had rented this movie and they were at my grandparents' house. They were watching it. And I think I snuck into the room to see what movie they were watching. And the scene that's been stuck in my mind forever, watch, there's two scenes. But the main one that I remember sneaking in and watching was the scene where Freddy Krueger is ripping through Jesse's body. And that terrified me. Like, it's ripping through his, like, I remember his hands coming through his chest. It's like, oh man, that scene freaked me out. And I don't even know if I'm remembering it correctly, to be honest, but that scene, like tormented me for many years. And the other scene is the bus scene, where in the very opening sequence, when they're on the school bus and it goes to like hell, and essentially, that terrified me too. And that actually terrified me of riding the school bus. Yep. I was a young lad in the 90s that was terrified riding the school bus because I saw this movie when I was way too young. But it's crazy that this movie has like stuck with me, and I think its brutality, its craziness has been up there, has made this movie one of the top Nightmare on Elm Street movies because of its how different it is, how brutal it is, how crazy the undertones are too, if you think about it. Which has then have made this movie kind of been as my top three Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Because you know what? The original is still the best. Dream Wars is amazing. But yeah, this one is up there too. And it took me many years to ever see this movie again. I think when I did my first rewatch of all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies was the first time I watched this movie all the way through, and I was like, "Wow, this is a great movie." But this isn't the movie I kind of let build up in my head for many years as I was a younger child. But you know what though, this movie could have went in many different directions. Like Wes Craven wasn't involved with this movie. We never had Nancy. The character of Jesse is the very first male, like last character, like final boy, I guess you can say. But yeah, so this is, like I said, this is a very brutal movie. Gave us the most newest design to Freddy Krueger. Gave us the look that we were kind of seeing. We still haven't got to MTV Freddy yet, which is going to be later on. But yeah, this is a great Freddy Krueger movie, and if you've never seen it, I do recommend you do check this one out. So those are the 5 movies that are turning 40 this month. Can you believe it? It's crazy to think about these movies turning 40. Have you seen any of these movies? Let me know in the comment section down below. Which is your favorite from these 5 movies? Did you know any of those fun facts I brought up about any of these movies? Let me know in the comment section down below. And remember to hit the like, the subscribe, the notification bell. That way you're notified every time a new video is posted. And until next time, this is JD with a Figgy Pop Collector channel.
That concludes a Figgy Pop transmission.